Welcome back to Cosmic Comics. Between the Kree-Skrull War and the Thanos War, we have 3 issues of Captain Marvel that I'm going to discuss in brief before moving on to the full Thanos War. Issue number 22 is written by Jerry Conway. Issue number 23 and number 24 are written by Marv Wolfman. These issues were published between September of 1972 and January of 1973. Issue number 22 begins a 2-issue story arc with a new villain, Megaton. Jules Carter, an atomic researcher working in the Arctic, discovers an abandoned Kree outpost. The giant computer looking after the base attacks his mind with his deepest fears. As this process begins, we can see a pair of negabands sitting atop of some equipment. Once the process is complete, Jules begins to glow. The researchers flee the base, and by the time the Kree base explodes a short time later, he's transformed into the villain Megaton and only interested in destruction. He needs more power to grow, and this puts him into conflict with Captain Marvel. At the end of the Kree-Skrull War, in order to save Rick Jones' life, Marvel enjoins his life force to Rick's once more. After this, initially, Marvel isn't very active, but over time Marvel's presence begins building up latent energy within Rick Jones. Without a pair of Naga bands, there's seemingly no way to release this energy. Professor Savannah at State University uses his photon ray in an attempt to control the increasing energies within Rick Jones. Megaton kidnaps Rick Jones and takes him back to the Arctic after Rick informs Megaton that once he takes on too much power, he's going to explode. Megaton leaves to research what Rick is telling him, and he takes Rick along to ensure that he's telling the truth. Against all odds, or perhaps it was serendipity, the place Megaton takes Rick happens to be the Kree outpost on Earth. And of course, while they are there, Rick grabs the negabands. Seriously, this is almost too convenient. Frustratingly, we're right back where we were with Rick and Marvel's relationship prior to the Kree-Skrull War, even down to Captain Marvel being capable of spending a maximum of 3 hours outside of the negative zone before being forcibly switched back with Rick Jones. Issue number 24 pits Rick and Marvel against Dr. Mind, an old colleague of Professor Savannah. One of the more interesting things is that after Rick Jones leaves the Avengers, he throws away his Avengers ID. Dr. Mind fishes it out of the trash and then tails Rick. He spies on Rick long enough to watch him turn into Captain Marvel for the first time. That's some serious dedication considering Rick got dropped off in the middle of the desert after hitching a ride. Dr. Mind's most impressive accomplishment in this issue is successfully pulling off a missile attack against the Pentagon, followed by a full-scale attack on the premises. This is seriously impressive. Unfortunately for Dr. Mind, he kills his own lackey, Sin, with a shot that was meant for Captain Marvel. Dr. Mind is so distraught he commits suicide as a result. Wow, that was a drastic and quick conclusion. With that brief prologue out of the way, we're ready to discuss the Thanos War arc. This is the arc that solidifies Thanos' role as a big, bad, evil guy, even prior to the Infinity Gauntlet. And it also gives us a Captain Marvel that I think comes to mind when most people remember him. Either that or perhaps the old green and white Kree uniform that he used to wear. But this is his individual, more distinctive look. This crossover event is hands down his defining moment outside of his death. Officially, the Thanos War doesn't begin until Captain Marvel Volume 1, Issue number 25. In reality, everything starts earlier in the year with an iconic issue of The Invincible Iron Man, Issue number 55, published in 1973 and written by Jim Starlin and Mike Friedrich. I think most people, when they look at this storyline, just look at the core books within the arc, but the full storyline is stretched out against multiple titles over the course of about a year, with this being the culmination of those events. This arc gives us some truly memorable characters such as Thanos, Mentor, Eros, Moondragon, Drax the Destroyer, and more. let's look at the first issue, starting with Captain Marvel, Volume 1, Issue number 25, published in 1973 and written by Mike Friedrich. The story opens with Marvel being attacked by 2 aliens and a robot for unknown reasons. Marvel takes out the 3 assailants without much effort. After the battle is over, the robot X-7 reports data collected from the fight back to a being referred to as Master Lord. Once the data has been transmitted, all 3 of the thugs are transported away. Marvel notes that this is evidence of an unseen opponent. Rick Jones checks in on Marvel from the negative zone. Marvel shares his fears with Rick, and for an unknown reason, Marvel has lost half of his powers. Master Lord is listening in and happy to hear this. It corroborates with his own results. Master Lord radios over to Squadron S to tell them to commence Operation Kree Crusher. An observant eye might already recognize the lines around the mouth foreshadowing Thanos. Agent S-1, or I'm sure Skrull-1, then visits Professor Savannah and shoots him when he opens the door. Shortly after this takes place, Captain Marvel arrives. Captain Marvel thinks that Dr. Savannah's photon ray treatments, briefly covered earlier in this episode, might be the reason for his loss of power. Thanos also suspects this, and it's why he sent Agent S-1 here in advance of Marvel. Oddly, Marvel decides to change back into Rick Jones before visiting with Professor Savannah because he claims that the professor doesn't know Captain Marvel. Well, they may not know each other well, but the two have met. The professor is aware of Rick's problem, and I'm sure that he knows who Captain Marvel is. Not that it matters, as it was already established that Captain Marvel's 3 hours are almost up. Marvel fails to notice the forced entry on the door before slapping his wrists together. Much as one might have feared, Rick finds the professor dead. Unfortunately for Rick, the cop who killed Professor Savannah is still there and ready to arrest Rick on murder charges. Rick is certain that his friend and love interest, Professor Savannah's niece, Luann, will vouch for him. Instead, she insists that Rick was the one who shot her uncle. Rick realizes that he's being framed for murder and attempts to make his escape by releasing Marvel. Before he can get his wrists together, he's hit over the back of his head and temporarily incapacitated. Rick is cuffed and taken to a rundown police precinct where he's taken into Flynn's office for questioning without a lawyer. One would have thought that they would have taken more care to ensure Rick couldn't change form, but he's still capable of clinging his wrists together. A weakened Marvel has trouble with the handcuffs, but these can't hold back Captain Marvel. Before Marvel can flee the scene, Ronan the Accuser appears and sentences Marvel to death, but quickly disappears. Right after this, Megaton bursts in and punches Marvel across the room. Megaton also disappears. Rick and Marvel know that something is up. Marvel attempts to leave once more, but finds the door barred before being interrupted by Yon-Rogg. Marvel's foes continue to come, one after another. I'm unsure if the 3 hours were up or if Marvel is driven nuts by the events taking place. Once Rick Jones returns, he's overcome with exhaustion. Members of Squad S rush in and place a device on Rick's head that they call the Psycho Probe and declare that Captain Marvel is defeated. Our 2 enemies appear before us as Rick Jones and Captain Marvel before transforming back into the Skrulls, Skrug and Super Skrull. Of note here, Super Skrull doesn't appear to be working, at least directly for the Skrull Empire, as he is currently reporting back to the Master Lord. Scrag goes on to file the report, and we see the first signs that he's unhappy with Super Skrull's leadership, but Super Skrull is the one in charge here, and he commands Scrag to report back. Scrag seems happy to do this, as it gives him the opportunity to take credit for the mission's success. Scrag is referred to as Agent S-1, which makes Super Skrull Agent S-2. Super Skrull is upset by Scrag's characterization of events, and the reader is given a bit of a reveal. Marvel's loss of powers over the past few weeks were all part of a plot enacted by Scrag. Scrag theorized that by firing a photon ray at Captain Marvel, that he could cause his body to start converting sunlight into energy. The downside of this, at night, and any time Marvel wasn't in direct sunlight, he would lose about half of his power. Scrag was certain that if he killed Professor Savannah, that Rick Jones would then show up to investigate. That bit of the plot seems a little bit iffy, but hey, it worked. The Skrulls then pretended to be the cop and Luann. As for all of Marvel's old enemies showing up, it was the Skrulls taking turns changing shapes. Super Skrull would use his invisibility power to distract Marvel, while the other one would change shapes. The constant barrage of enemies was enough to cause instant psychosis on Marvel. I mean, no offense, but Marvel has seen worse than this plenty of times. I seriously doubt that this is the moment he would crack. Super Skrull and Skrug are left arguing over which one was more important in the battle, brains or brawn. While this is going on, their helmet is supposed to be extracting information on the negative zone, but Rick Jones has taken it off, claiming that they needed a completely wiped out mind for it to work. Rick claims that he knew this was all a setup from the beginning, but he wanted to learn the full story before extracting his revenge. Not that it's Rick that does much revenging, because he pulls out Marvel to do the heavy lifting. With Scrag's plan a failure, Super Skrull uses the powers of the Fantastic Four to battle against Marvel. These two battle until the building begins to collapse around them. Afterwards, Super Skrull and Scrag climb out of the rubble. Super Skrull oddly presumes that Captain Marvel is dead, while Scrag complains that they have aborted their assigned mission. The two of them leave to report back to the Master Lord. Rick Jones climbs out of the rubble just in time to see the two Skrulls disappear. Both Marvel and Rick are left wondering who Master Lord is and how are they going to defeat him. To figure out what's going on, Marvel visits Luann to inquire as to why she turned her back on Rick without realizing that the one who betrayed Rick was actually a Skrull. Like a true madman, instead of knocking when Marvel arrives, he literally bursts down Luann's door. Even crazier is that she doesn't seem the least bit surprised. Rick is ready to have Marvel beat the information they need out of her, but Marvel claims that he's not as fired up as Rick. Oh really? Did you burn all that fire out bursting the door down? It turns out that Luann was expecting Marvel, and she's ready to share some answers. The story she shares begins on Titan, a moon of Saturn. For some reason it is listed here as Titan. Luann tells us that Titan is ruled by a dictator named Thanos, who dreams of ruling the universe. To aid him in his quest, he has gathered an army of outcasts, which he pulled from over 100 violent worlds. Before Thanos can rule galaxies, he needs to tend to his own backyard, and that means conquering Earth. To this end, a plan was enacted. Thanos is working with an unnamed co-conspirator who has developed a slave disk that is beyond anyone on Earth's technological scope to remove. These disks have been placed on various people with positions of power. With the world leaders at his command, Thanos is ready to rule the Earth. Afterwards, a short scuffle breaks out where Luann attempts to kill Marvel, and we learn that Thanos can't control a person's every move, only specific actions and words. Once Marvel turns back into Rick Jones, we're shown that despite the initial setback, this is all part of Scrag's new plan. Super Skrull just wants a chance to take Marvel out of commission, but Thanos reminds him who is in charge and directs him towards their new plan of attack. Super Skrull flames on and begins his mission. Interestingly, we learn at this time Thanos is more interested in gaining information than victory. For the time being, Super Skrull has been tasked with finding an opponent for Marvel. In a world full of supers, it doesn't take long before Super Skrull runs across Benjamin Grimm. Before the battle begins, we're told that Super Skrull is holding back. He can't kill the thing because he needs Thanos to help him restore his standing within the Skrull Empire. Super Skrull drops an address for an obvious trap, but the Thing says he's ready for it. On the following page, we learn that this is the same address that Luann was taken to be outfitted with a slave disc. Rick is taking a chance here. We have no idea if Luann's affections are real, or, as Marvel points out, we don't know if the information she gave was good either. And in fact, we can see by this panel right here with the Skrulls that it appears that they're in control of her actions. Once Rick arrives, the place is a dump. 2 floors up, Scrag and Thanos monitor the situation. Also, we learn a little more about Thanos' motivation. Marvel either has or knows where something is that will assist Thanos in his attempted conquest. As the Thing enters the building, he's shot by a device rising out of the floor. It successfully lands a shot on Ben, and he loses his voice. Scrag had planned for this. Both Ben and Rick Jones know the Skrulls were involved, so the idea is that when the two meet, they won't trust each other. And sure enough, Scrag's plan appears to work. When Rick sees the Thing, he turns into Marvel, who in turn sucker punches the Thing. The Thing can't explain to Marvel what's going on because he can't speak. So instead of trying to de-escalate the situation, he starts punching back. Scrug is hoping that his latest plan works. Thanos reminds him that if he should fail, death stands near. Anybody reading this the first time through might think twice about Thanos' words, but as we'll soon learn, he literally has death standing near. The Thing is ready to wrap this fight up and buries Marvel in a pile of rubble. It does no good. Marvel rises from the debris and returns the favor by electrocuting the Thing. Ben is seemingly down for the count while an enraged Marvel grabs a sharp piece of metal and runs over to kill what he assumes to be a Skrull. And Marvel stops short. He claims that there is no way he could kill an enemy in such a heartless manner. Much to Scrug's dismay, the electrical jolt has given the Thing his voice back. Thanos says it best. Thanos wanted a shattered foe, but instead, Marvel has been mentally strengthened. Scruggs has now failed Thanos twice, and thus, Thanos has no more need of him, and hands him over to Madam Death. The Skrulls' death cries are heard by Marvel and the Thing, who rush upstairs to investigate. They burst down the door, and behind it they find a petrified Scruggs. Literally petrified. Marvel wants to know who did this and doesn't have to wait long for his answer. Despite his earlier appearances, to me, this page will always represent that first big Thanos reveal. Here, Thanos, King of Titan, makes his intentions clear. He wants to be Emperor of the Universe. In order to do so, he needs hidden knowledge that only Captain Marvel can reveal. The Thing does that thing that the Thing does. He rushes in. One important thing to note, it appears as though Benjamin Grimm can't see Lady Death. Notice that he says, maybe what you and your buddy Super Skrull need is a good smack in the chops. He doesn't make any mention of her. This sets up a pretty cool dynamic between Thanos and Death. She is often seen in his presence, but under most circumstances, nobody else can see her. This then reinforces people's opinion of him as the Mad Titan. Thanos dispatches Ben with a flick of his fingers. Marvel claims that if it is information that Thanos is after, then he'll be sorely disappointed in attempting to extract it from a Kree soldier. Okay, sure, I thought Marvel had renounced his place within the Kree military during the Kree-Skrull War, but it appears as though Marvel once more claims his place within the Kree Empire. Thanos then does a pretty flashy show of power. He informs Marvel that he isn't the one Thanos is after. It's Rick Jones. And in saying this, Thanos forces Marvel to change back into Rick Jones. As Rick says, "What? Nobody's ever done that before." And the stage has been set. Thanos leaves with his prize. The Thing wakes up and finds everybody gone. Even the statue of Scruggs Captain Marvel, issue number 27, written by Jim Starlin and Mike Friedrich, begins with Thanos directing some of his crew to take Rick to the Mind Cyclone. As if to show the diversity of races working for Thanos, a Badoon is instructed to finish strapping Rick to the machine. Rick is strapped in, and very soon his entire mind has been encoded into Isaac, which stands for Integral Synaptic Anti-Anionic Computer, and is the computer system which was built by Mentor and keeps the hollowed world of Titan working and running. Rick is taken away but instructed not to be held with the others, while Thanos checks to make sure that the data they pulled is accurate, which is a cheap excuse for a recap. Thanos finds satisfactory results. What information could be so valuable that Thanos has gone through this much trouble? What could Rick Jones have that could possibly be of use to Thanos? The location of the most powerful weapon to date. The Cosmic Cube. Moments later, Isaac prints out the location of the cube. Thanos prepares to leave by putting Super Skrull in command during his absence. Heaping honors upon honors, Thanos leaves his personal Unisphere with the Skrull. We aren't told exactly what this is, beyond that it'll protect them if Drax the Destroyer or any of the original Eternals of Titan attack. One can see some apprehension on the part of Super Skrull, who is usually pretty cocky about his combat skills, but Thanos ensures him the Unisphere will do its job. Rick Jones is in his cell, and this time his captors were smart enough to give him cuffs that prevent him from slapping his wrists together. Rick is sitting in the dark, being miserable when somebody walks up and breaks his cuffs. Okay. I thought Rick was supposed to be kept away from everybody else so that this couldn't happen. But there's our answer. Rick has been rescued by Mentor and Arrows, who are there as members of the free-fighting true army of Titan. One would have thought that Thanos would have finished conquering Titan before heading to Earth. Amazingly, he killed almost every Eternal when he attacked Titan, but both his brother and father survived the attack. Wow, such luck. Mentor introduces himself as the father of Thanos and creator of Titan. Arrows, Mentor's other son and Thanos' brother, claims to be a man of love and adventure. The three of them then climb their way out of Rick's cell. Thanos, what were you thinking? Who builds a jail cell like this? When they reach the top and head outside, Rick sees a destroyed world filled with rot. Rick gets so angry what he's seeing that he starts to cry and decides to let Captain Marvel out for a bit. Marvel, for the second time in this arc, points out that Rick Jones is far more emotional than himself, and all the same, he pledges to fight for Titan and against Thanos. And in another incredible show of power, Thanos travels from Titan to Earth in a very short period of time. Death still waits by his side. We're told that the deserted cavern Thanos has landed by has never had a man venture inside, but the Cosmic Cube got in there, right? And I think Doom was the last one who saw it in there. Thanos claims to be drawn toward the cube like a moth to the flame. This is interesting as during the cube's previous appearance we saw Doom also being drawn towards the cube. Thanos turns a corner in the cavern and then he sees it. The Cosmic Cube. This is a great panel. I'm not sure if it was intended, but it gives us some fantastic foreshadowing. Thanos says, "Once I possess it, and it me, no being born of woman can stop me." What an interesting choice of words, because the being who arrives to challenge him happens to be born of neither man nor woman. Yes, we're talking about Drax the Destroyer. Unfortunately, this portion of the arc won't be touched on again until the next issue. This break makes for a great opportunity to point out that Adam Warlock was also not born of woman. Meanwhile, back at Avengers Mansion, Rick Jones' Avengers ID makes another appearance. Luann has arrived at the mansion carrying the card and asking for help. Iron Man expects a trap, and Captain America tells the Avengers to meet her with force. Captain America isn't ready for the scared young lady who comes crashing in, warning him about a trap set for Rick Jones by Thanos. Back on Saturn, Mentor and Eros are kind enough to volunteer Marvel to lead an attack on the Hall of Science. They feel this is a good time to strike because Thanos is currently gone. As they near their objective, Marvel wants to know about its fortifications and how many troops the Eternals have available. Eros is kind enough to inform him that the free-fighting army of Titan now numbers 3 soldiers thanks to the addition of Marvel. They didn't get much of a chance to formulate a plan as 3 of Thanos' goons show up to place them under arrest for treason. Mentor is going on about being the creator of this world, getting pissy, and using his ability to manipulate the cosmic forces around him to fling his foes away. You gotta love this next panel where Eros points out that those who approached them were most likely independent contractors. I really enjoy the idea of Thanos not being capable of attracting enough of an army on his own, so he has to go out and hire mercenaries to act as guards on his own home planet. Anyway, any additional guards will likely know something is up fairly soon. Mentor shares that as long as Thanos has the tapes of Rick's mind, he will be capable of predicting Marvel's every move. Mentor insists that the tapes must be destroyed. It is so cute that none of them realize that data can easily be copied and stored elsewhere. And what do you know? How about that? The tapes that they're looking for just so happen to be behind the door that they're all standing in front of. Yeah. As Marvel makes his way towards the room, we see a strange sight above his head. This scary little squiggle is the first appearance of Eon within the pages of Marvel. We switch over to Super Skrull, who, in Thanos' absence, is prepared to view the information Rick Jones knows concerning the origins of the Cosmic Cube. But before we or Super Skrull can learn anything useful, the doorway behind him explodes inward. Marvel looks really cool in this shot, but his lines are pretty corny. Super Skrull? Then my task is doubled. And believe me, Skrull, so is my pleasure. As the two battle, the computer begins to relay the information it has available. The events at the end of the Kree-Skrull War recounted. If you want to catch up on that, follow the link above to my video on the Kree-Skrull War, where I cover the entire thing. After the war, Marvel and Rick were recombined into one body. The Supreme Intelligence felt that Rick, combined with Marvel, would no longer be reliable as a weapon. So, as a precaution, he implanted the location of the Cosmic Cube into Rick Jones' unconsciousness. What? No. The computer does have some speculation about why the Supreme Intelligence did this. Faint traces of the Supreme Intelligence left on Rick Jones' unconscious indicate that Rick Jones was supposed to be capable of recalling the device's location in conjunction with a universal doomsday event. And this raises so many questions. So many. The first one Marvel zeroes in on is, how did Thanos know that Rick had this information? Super Skrull tells Marvel that he'll never know. Wahahahaha! Outside, Mentor and Eros are enjoying their time fighting off Thanos' intergalactic hordes, but Mentor is hoping Marvel finishes up before the two of them run out of energy. Inside, Marvel battles with Super Skrull. He's pleased to discover that Titan's artificial light makes him stronger than he has been lately. Once he gets Super Skrull onto the ground, the Skrull turns his flame on. He catches Marvel with enough of his blast to burn most of Marvel's uniform off. Marvel, who has been suppressing a lot of emotion lately, has had enough. The heat from Super Skrull was enough to bring his kettle to a boil. He lets loose his rage upon the Skrull in a mighty blow. Afterwards, there is a huge explosion. Word travels throughout the troops that Super Skrull has been defeated, and the intergalactic horde begins to flee. Mentor and Eros are afraid Marvel gave his life to save them and are relieved to discover that he lives. His punch sent the Skrull hurling into the tapes that Marvel needs to destroy. Super Skrull climbs up from the wreckage, and at long last he moves to use the Unisphere. He picks it up, but doesn't appear to know how it turns on. He holds it and waves it around before dropping it on the ground. It takes a couple of bounces before shattering. Marvel, as he leaves, appears to think Super Skrull is dead, but we know he's merely resting. Marvel turns to take care of other tasks. Marvel walks up to the computer panel and pushes the button which erases those tapes once and for all. We get this weird or awesome, depending on how you feel about it, moment between Marvel and Mentor. The two stand, staring into each other's eyes, while Marvel questions himself. Once gentle, now harsh. Once kind, now vengeful. Once soft, now hard. As the two look at each other, Marvel stops to wonder what this entire struggle has been for. It seems like they haven't been capable of getting ahead. Titan is still enslaved and Thanos is closer to the cube than ever, so why? Did they forget what they discussed earlier in the issue? They need to destroy the copies of the tapes first, or Thanos can predict Marvel's every move. That's the whole bit that they just wrapped up. Mentor tells Marvel that Marvel needs to return to Earth while he and Eros work to free Titan. Mentor then hits Marvel with a blast which transports him back to Earth. I'll stop and say that this power is not one that is in Mentor's wheelhouse on a regular basis, and I think it's a one-time thing done here to move the story along. What can I say other than long space distances are sometimes hard on writers? Marvel is transported to the roof of Avengers headquarters. This alerts those inside, and Black Panther checks out the alarm. Marvel tells him that he's looking for a girl, and Black Panther knows it must be the one who stopped by Avengers Mansion earlier. Unfortunately, she hasn't woken up since she collapsed in Captain America's arms. Before moving on to issue number 27, I'd like to point out this really cool infographic given to us instead of a letters page this month. I'll also pause for a second on issue 27's opening splash, showing us all the characters this story is about to wrap into its web. Jim Starlin is given credit for the plot on Chapter 2, while Mike Friedrich is given credit for the script in Chapters 1 and 3. I'm not certain what the distinction is, but Captain America refers to Rick's girlfriend as a zombie, but Vision is kind enough to correct him and refers to it as a state of induced shock. It must be a pretty bad form of shock, as it's taking one of Tony Stark's inventions just to keep her alive at the moment. Rick is concerned for his girl Luann, and he asks Marvel for advice. Marvel comes across cold when he tells Rick that Luann is just a small part of a much larger space war. Captain Marvel has seemingly forgotten about a time when he would have done anything to save his now dead love, Una. Captain America interrupts Rick's conversation with himself. Iron Man picks up on the fact that Rick mentioned Thanos. While Rick tells the Avengers about Thanos, his desire to rule the universe, and the fact that he's headed for Earth, Marvel has a run-in with Eon in the negative zone. We get this weird back and forth. Something either ask Eon or Eon ask himself, stating that the crisis ultimate nears, and then ask if it should act. Something then seemingly answers the first voice, also responding to Eon, stating that Eon needs to wait until the tension has risen more. Back to Avengers headquarters. Some foreshadowing is thrown in. We're shown a shadowy figure entering Avengers headquarters and slipping past their security monitors. Whomever is here, they are looking for a fight. Rick offers to bring out Marvel, and oddly the Scarlet Witch is standing there with an extra costume ready to go. How is this not a little bit weird? Marvel's costume was a one-of-a-kind Kree uniform made with special Kree technology, which gave him all sorts of additional protection. Rick throws his wrists together and we get, this. Now this is peak Kree form. Look at that raw power, and now it makes sense why the Scarlet Witch had a uniform ready. The universe knew that much sexiness needed to be contained. Marvel recounts the danger at hand to the Avengers and tells them that Thanos is after the Cosmic Cube. Both Iron Man and Captain America immediately recognize the scope of the threat. Black Panther offers to retrieve Iron Man's tape on Thanos. Black Panther fails to notice the shadowy figure standing in a side hallway. The intruder uses the opportunity to knock the Black Panther out. Meanwhile, Iron Man is showing Marvel what is wrong with Luann. It's the slave disc. Iron Man has discovered a way to slow it down, but he doesn't have a way to remove it. Iron Man then reveals that he is aware of another plot involving the disc, one that shows Thanos' plan to infiltrate the Earth by having slaves in positions of power is well underway. Vision is concerned that T'Challa must be having trouble finding the tape and leaves to check on the Black Panther. The hidden figure sneaks up behind an Avenger. This time he lands a hefty piece of equipment on the back of Vision's head. This leads to two more Avengers, Wanda and Captain America, setting off to check in on Vision. The Scarlet Witch rushes ahead and is taken down by a single slap. Captain America sounds the alarm that they have an intruder, but nobody seems to hear. He tosses his shield, and in a truly awesome flex, the figure bounces it off of his chest. Needless to say, Cap is amazed and asks who he is, but the being lets Captain America know that he's not worthy of an answer because he won't live long enough to use the information. The shadowy figure drops Captain America with a 2-punch combo. That first punch to the shield says it all. You can see it in Captain America's eyes. He knows he's going down. At this point, Marvel and Iron Man know something is up, but Iron Man still elects to be the next victim. He's straight up cocky about it. For those of you who play Dungeons & Dragons, this is why you never split the party. Iron Man insists that he can handle this on his own. This is followed by 3 loud crashes and then silence. Anybody reading this would assume Thanos just waltzed through 5 Avengers. That's brutal. Even as the intruder walks in the room, Marvel calls him Thanos and shouts that only Thanos could have defeated the Avengers, but the figure corrects him, lets Marvel know that Thanos has powerful friends. A classic Iron Man villain returns for only his 4th appearance in the pages of Marvel, Basil Sandhurst, or as he's more infamously known, the Controller. And Rick was right about one thing. He's here to take Luann. He tells our heroes that Thanos is on Earth retrieving the cube, and that he's been working with Thanos to take over the world using the Controller's slave disc. Okay, finally we make it back to Thanos and Drax the Destroyer. He confronts Thanos, claiming that not even the Angel of Doom can stop him. This has to be a veiled reference to Death's presence. Here we have 2 enemies in their second contest. During the first, a world was destroyed and Thanos walked away the victor. For both parties, the accomplishment of a goal stands before them. For Drax, it is the death of Thanos. For Thanos, it is the possession of the Cosmic Cube. One of them will have to fall in order for the other to be successful. Both stand before one another, claiming to have brought death there, and ready to introduce her to the other. Thanos sees the impasse, and if the Destroyer was the one who called for the duel, Thanos is choosing the weapons. His chosen style of combat, time, mind, sync, warp. What? Seriously? Reality changes and becomes a thing of the past. They have entered the world of sync warp. Oh, this is so weird. Thanos attacks Drax with fists of shattered illusions and broken promises, ghosts of past deeds and specters of future evils. Thanos assumes his taunts have caused the Destroyer's mind to crack and that he has won. The Destroyer surprises Thanos with a smashing blow. Thanos recovers, still taunting the Destroyer as he swallows him whole and challenges him to confront his id. Thanos claims to have trapped the Destroyer within a prison of insanity and madness. But Thanos picked the wrong target to challenge to the sync warp. The Destroyer lets loose a bunch of mumbo-jumbo right here, but what it all boils down to is the Destroyer is immortal, and since he can't die, he can't be enslaved, and life equals freedom. The Destroyer cherishes life and demands to be free. We then get this awesomely trippy page that both represents the greater conflict and the battle taking place between Thanos and the Destroyer. The Destroyer wins the competition, and Thanos is shocked as he didn't know that there was a mind powerful enough to escape the sync warp, and that is something to remember. The Destroyer, despite oftentimes being singular in focus, has a very powerful mind. Thanos, despite losing the competition, considers killing the Destroyer. He would have done so, but he no longer considers the Destroyer a threat. The most interesting thing Thanos says on this panel, senseless slaughter is not Thanos' way. This reflects some of the same sentiments we saw expressed in Thanos Rising Volume 1. Thanos now feels invincible. Thanos finally has the Cosmic Cube. This might be the earliest example of Thanos essentially beating himself and always leaving a door open for his own inevitable defeat. He has an opportunity to incapacitate or destroy Drax once and for all, but perhaps we should believe Thanos. Perhaps he's on one of his on and off again moods between when he loves killing and when he hates killing. This will become somewhat typical of Thanos. His hubris causes him to overlook potential threats. Switching back to the controller, we discover that he's more powerful than he appears. Each and every slave disk he places combines it into his mental wave absorption, meaning that every mind he controls makes him stronger. At this point, he's super strong, and Marvel can tell that his power is already equal to somebody such as Thor. A slave disk is placed on Marvel with the goal of making him the controller's first super slave, which I am pretty sure is just a slave with superpowers. But the controller's device wasn't made for a man with two minds, and thus Marvel and Rick are capable of overcoming the device. Marvel tosses the device back at its maker while telling its foe the decree is no man's slave. Dang, Marvel, you might have played along for a little bit. You already admitted that this guy is stronger than you. The controller tells Marvel that if he won't be a slave, then the only other option is death. And for some reason, the controller keeps talking, telling Marvel that he's doing all this because Thanos has promised him the Viceroy's seat on Earth once he takes over. In order to ensure he accomplishes this, the controller is willing to bring down the entire place and starts doing just that. The controller begins ripping apart the walls of Avengers headquarters. And oh boy, it looks like Eon, who is still talking to himself, has decided that this is the moment of greater tension. Now is the moment to intervene, but we don't get to see what happens next. Instead, we are shown the controller holding an unconscious Luann and standing next to a heap of rubble that was once part of Avengers headquarters. He looks over the rubble and notes that nothing moves from within the wreckage. He then goes on to blame Thanos for his losing control of Luann and thus allowing her an opportunity to alert the Avengers. He temporarily lost control of her when Thanos' energies were concentrated elsewhere. What the controller fails to notice, buried deep within the rubble, is a bloodied Rick Jones. He can't escape due to a foot being pinned down by debris. He tries clinging his wrists together frantically, but nothing happens. And Chapter 2 ends on a pretty sour note. As Rick says, the Avengers just got canned. Thanos has the cube. The controller just took off with his girl. And Captain Marvel is seemingly gone. At the end of Chapter 2, we get a prologue. Before the issue closes out, we're shown where Marvel was taken. A place with no here, there, or in between. Marvel shouts, wanting to know why he's here instead of fighting for the fate of the universe. Eon tells Marvel that he has been brought here to fight Thanos. He goes on to make the analogy that Thanos is a universal poison, and a universal poison requires the preparation of a universal antidote. Mar-Vell is going to be prepared into that antidote, but first, Mar-Vell the soldier must die. Oh boy, as far as I'm concerned, this is where it starts getting good. Eon is on the scene. I can't think of a better place to put this into the mix. This will be the 4th iteration of Captain Marvel since he was introduced. He started out as a Kree soldier, then he renounced his Kree heritage and became a servant of Zoe, who was really Ronan the Accuser. Zoe gave Marvel new powers, then Marvel went back into the service of the Kree once more, where he was given even more powers by the Supreme Intelligence, while supposedly keeping his Zoe powers, but we never get to see much evidence of that. And now we are set up for Eon to supercharge Marvel once again. So many revisions in such a short period of time shows how hard it was to keep the public's interest in the character of Captain Marvel. The monthly comic had already been canceled once and then resurrected, and it had been slated to be canceled a second time. Every time the public began to lose interest, it seems as though whomever was writing him at the time would just give their story a jolt by giving Marvel a new and better set of powers, because in the early issues, Marvel isn't a super, he's just a soldier. And let's stop and say, for a proper reveal, Eon looks fantastic. I love the look of a psychedelic space opera. Speaking of great looks, Captain Marvel issue number 29, to me, is one of the most iconic covers of the run. We get another great shot of Eon on this issue's splash page, where he tells Marvel that he's been waiting 8 billion years to destroy Captain Marvel, the Warrior. He does a quick recap, reminding the reader of the fight with the Controller and the plight of Rick Jones, trapped beneath Avengers Mansion. Meanwhile, Captain Marvel was taken to a distant solar system where he meets Eon, he who waits. We also learn that Kronos also knew of and or foretold of Marvel's coming. This raises more questions than I want to spend time diving into at the moment, but I will drop a couple. If you knew Marvel was foretold of to deal with Thanos, then why did he create Drax the Destroyer? Also, is there any other time Kronos is referred to as the cosmic balance as he is here? And what does that mean? And does it tie into the fulcrum in any meaningful way? I digress. Once again, Eon insists that Captain Marvel, the Warrior, must die so that the universe may live. Marvel wants to know why he has to die, so Eon offers to show him the truth. All of Marvel's foes and the foes of men are referred to as Ravagers. They strive to destroy men's dreams, and few are the men who can overcome their own Ravagers. As the Ravagers attack Marvel, Eon begins telling Marvel that he won't win this battle. Again, Marvel wants to know why this is happening. Eon tells him that the universe is in need of a champion, and that Marvel is that champion. Again, Marvel wants to know why this is happening to him. And again, Eon answers, because Marvel must change. In order for this change to take place, Marvel has to want to change. And this panel holds a special place in my heart. I can't think of another time where Eon refers to his large eye, but he does so here. He calls it his soul's eye, and he uses it to share privileged information with Marvel that no mortal has ever been able to see. And here we are told some of the story of the Eternals' origins for the first time. Okay, I was going to cover this here, but I can't. As soon as I start talking about the early history of Titan, as it's presented here, all I do is get caught up in how many different ways everything has been changed and retconned later. Instead, I'm going to do another video on that maybe at some point in the future to avoid an exceptionally long aside that really does need its own video. Hopefully, if you're watching this in the future, I've already put up a link in the corner. So let's just say Marvel gets filled in on the history of Titan, and he's told that Titan is in danger of being snuffed out by Thanos. But wait, according to modern Marvel, shouldn't that have already taken place? Alright, just gotta put on those blinders and push on through. We get another panel of Thanos lording about with the cosmic cube in his hand. Thanos reflects on the obstacles that stand in the way of his completing his plan. The most dangerous of these obstacles is Drax the Destroyer. Here we see Thanos reflect on the fact that he could have killed the Destroyer during their last encounter, but he chose not to. Even Thanos seems at a loss as to why he did this, and speculates that perhaps he did it out of respect or curiosity. This takes us back to Drax for a moment, who has awakened in the caves where Thanos left him. Seeing that the cosmic cube is gone, he leaves in search of Captain Marvel. Luann wakes up inside of a secret laboratory somewhere in New York while the controller stands over her. He is going to install a new slave disk on her, only now he states that his previous slave disk malfunctioned, while before he blamed it on Thanos giving too much attention elsewhere. Rick Jones, still trapped beneath the rubble, calls out for help and notes that somebody better show up quick because Rick is running out of oxygen. The cosmic cube allows Thanos to know that Rick Jones and Captain Marvel have separated from each other, but this leaves Thanos perplexed because the cosmic cube can't seem to locate Marvel. Back to Marvel, who still wants to know what's going on. Eon informs him that knowledge is torture and awareness before change. Eon knows this because Eon was created to know. And then things start going off the rails. Eon tells us that 8 billion years ago, Kronos foresaw the coming of Thanos and the Cosmic Cube, and he knew that himself and the Eternals of Titan would fail to stop Thanos. Problem number 1. There is no way that Kronos is 8 billion years old, since he started his life on a planet that is only about 4.5 billion years old. Problem number 2, at what point did Kronos see Thanos coming? Considering that Thanos is Kronos' grandchild, it stands to reason that he could have stopped all this by simply not reproducing or sterilizing Alars at a young age. Gets even worse, granted that this is the first telling of the story, and I'm not certain which I dislike more, this particular telling of events, or the fact that future writers such as Jack Kirby and Jason Aaron failed to respect the original story. Instead of clarifying events, each of these writers continues to muddy the waters of early Eternal history. I could be mistaken, but I don't think most of this early history really gets cleaned up until the early to mid-1980s. Even then, there are issues with timescales, reproduction rates, potential interbreeding, etc. that, to my knowledge, have never been addressed. Okay, back to the story at hand, and this panel caused confusion for a long time. Eon claims he was created by Kronos, who created Eon to wait for Captain Marvel. But if Kronos is still around, why does he need Eon to wait for Captain Marvel for billions of years? Anyways, Kronos and Eon are here to give Captain Marvel some new skills because it's their belief that skill might beat Thanos where raw power might lose. But again, if Kronos and Eon have all these mad skills to be handing out, why can't they just defeat Thanos? At any rate, they give Captain Marvel the skills. These 3 panels lay out the crux of this transformation. Eon tells Marvel that he has spent his life as a warrior, but that the universe doesn't need a warrior. It needs a protector. He who seeks to protect must first love, and there is no love in war. I'm not sure why Eon needs to show Marvel scenes of war, especially since most of the scenes depicted are from Earth. It seems as though Eon might use the Skrulls or Badoon over Nazis, communists, Christians, and Jews. Marvel has spent his life as a soldier. He's been in countless battles at this point. The dude knows war. But Eon needs him to answer. Are any of the reasons given for war worth the blood that it spills? Is it worth the death, the crippled? Eon points out that Marvel knows the taste of victory. Is it something that he savors, or Has he begun to realize that the only victor in war is death? And I have to wonder about why they chose to call death a he in this panel, as it is represented as a female for the rest of this story arc. Marvel counters that Aeon has forgotten about honor, which all men should fight for. I think this is a weak answer, but okay. Aeon counters by asking, where is the honor in killing your brother? Marvel is starting to look a little angry. He claims to hate war, but he's willing to fight for those that he loves. Awesome! Isn't that what Aeon said the universe needed, a protector? Probably not. Aeon claims to know about Marvel's battles for love and transports Marvel to a distant asteroid. Here he brings Marvel face to face with the results of mixing love and war. Una, the only woman Marvel has ever loved. You know, besides the Skrull princess he had a baby with during the Kree-Skrull War. Aeon points out that even though Marvel attempted to save Una, she still died. Not only that, she died attempting to protect Marvel. Aeon points out that Marvel's superior officer at the time was Colonel Jan Rog, whom he later fought to the death while attempting to bring Una back to life. Aeon keeps laying salt on the wounds. He calls Marvel out for failing in his quest and then shows Marvel what would have happened if he had managed to save her. Una would be alive and healthy to this day. Marvel can't believe his eyes. He bursts into tears and embraces his lover. His affections are not returned. Instead, he's attacked as Una drags them both to the ground. Marvel quickly takes control of the situation, wanting to know why she attacked the first thing she saw. Aeon informs him that her body would have been brought back to life, but the woman who lives is missing that which makes us all truly alive. A soul. Marvel, seeing the folly of his quest, breaks down into tears once more as Aeon asks Marvel, the warrior, if it was worth it. Marvel doesn't see how Aeon could ask. At this point, Aeon has shown Marvel everything that he can and wants to know how Marvel wants to move forward. Marvel answers, I spent my life fighting for that which I believed in, my world, my leaders, and have been wrong. Terribly wrong. I'll stop and say that this might be true of Marvel more than most other superheroes. He was used by the Supreme Intelligence when he was sent on a suicide mission to investigate the Brood. He was used by Ronan the Accuser when he pretended to be Zoe, and then tricked Marvel into nearly destroying his home planet. When Jan Rog was Captain Marvel's commanding officer, he was constantly attempting to send Marvel on impossible missions, or in some cases outright attempting to kill Marvel within some degree of plausible deniability. Basically, yeah, the last few years, Marvel has spent getting used and abused by most of those who had any form of authority over him. Aeon is going to physically change Marvel, but warns him that the mental change has to come from within. I love that Aeon says that and then contradicts himself in the very next panel. He starts out on the physical, expanding awareness, sharpening his senses, and tightening his reflexes, but then he says, let us grant you an abundance of humility and a touch of grandeur. Personally, I already thought Marvel had both of those things, but whatever. With crackling of energy, a new, calmer, and more confident Marvel is reborn. There are some minor changes to Marvel's costume, and his hair changes from gray to blonde, because we all know how important it is to keep that youthful appearance while protecting the universe. One might think that this is the end of the road, but our new protector is informed that in order for the baptism to be complete, he must go through a baptism of blood. Marvel seems a little put out, claiming that there hasn't been much of a change outside of those cosmetic differences. Aeon retorts, how is it that you know your hair is blonde without gazing in a mirror? We aren't told this during this issue, but what has taken place is Captain Marvel has gained a new power called Cosmic Awareness, which enhances Marvel's total reception to life. No movement is too slight to see, no sounds too low to hear, no smell too faint to detect, for all things in the universe are now one with Marvel. Aeon has prepared Marvel as much as he can. I had assumed that these two had already reached a decision. Eon asks if Marvel wants to go back to the life he knew as a warrior, or forward to greatness as a protector. Marvel takes a moment to reflect upon the decision, where he reflects upon the violence in his life. Most interesting is the statement, "Death was his constant companion." Although it would be years before we get a fleshed out Thanos backstory such as the one we find in Thanos Rising, Volume 1, this moment in many ways represents Marvel turning away from death at a moment when Thanos is vying for her embrace. Marvel makes up his mind to move forward as the protector, but first, as Eon warned, Marvel must overcome the ravages of his own mind. Marvel is beset upon from all sides. This is the first time Marvel gets to try out his new cosmic awareness. In the fight, we're told that Marvel knows his strengths and his weaknesses. Marvel knows all. Many will seek to destroy him. Many will nearly succeed, but he shall overcome. As much as I love this sequence of events, it's always grinded my gears a little. What is Marvel doing differently? He's using violence to overcome his foes. What good is Marvel's newfound awareness if it only results in more violence and suffering? What is he even protecting at this point? Does Marvel even look like a hero after that battle? Furrowed brow, red eyes, yikes. Eon tells Marvel that he has one final task to overcome. His own inner demon. Marvel is faced against his self. This is a kind of fun allegory as Marvel needs to literally defeat his own hostility, battle lust, love of destruction, perpetuation of hate, and death-seeking behaviors. Eon refers to the other self as Marvel's personal Thanos. Does Eon even know who Marvel is? Again, I see what they're going for here, but I think that Marvel already exemplifies many of these characteristics. The battle rages on and Eon continues. To live is to strive. To strive is to seek. And the only thing worth seeking is the only thing that gives life meaning. Freedom. Marvel leaving his warrior self and violent self and death-loving self behind, beats the crap out of his cancerous self and kills it. Eon tells Marvel that he and Kronos' cosmic opera is completed and Marvel is ready to fulfill his destiny. Marvel, despite his cosmic awareness, is still left asking Eon what to do next. Eon sends Marvel away, and darn it, I don't know why, but I always hope that Eon isn't going to stick Marvel and Rick Jones back together, but here we go again. Marvel and Rick finally switch places. Rick is a little aggravated from being pinned beneath 2 stories worth of rubble for who knows how long. Seriously, Avengers headquarters gets attacked and nobody responds and comes to check things out. Rick wants to know where Marvel has been, but he informs Rick that the question might be hard to answer. The issue ends on the following words: "I've seen and done many strange things. I've understood some of what's transpired, not all. But it started me thinking, and perhaps that was all I needed." Let's take a look at the Captain Marvel Volume 1, Issue number 30 cover. First, I like this artwork, which is very reminiscent of King Kong. I'd also like to focus on the little bit of false advertising in the little red box. This one's pure action from cover to cover. Oh, the lies they'll tell to sell a comic. I'll let you be the judge, but by my count, there isn't much action for the first half of this comic. Look at this splash page. Does this look like pure action? Iron Man, with Marvel's Kree knowledge of communications, has created a new device, the Control Tracer, which will allow them to track down Luann and the Controller. As Marvel prepares to leave, he thanks Iron Man for the help he's provided. Marvel is going to take on the Controller alone, claiming it's his responsibility. Iron Man doesn't like the idea, pointing out that the Controllers already beat Marvel once and tore the Avengers headquarters to the ground in the process. Marvel looks Iron Man right in the eye and says, "That was a different time. A different Captain Marvel." As Marvel turns and begins to walk away, Iron Man agrees Marvel has changed, and he thinks that it's more than the hair and costume. He notes that he's in awe of the calm and confident man he spoke with. Iron Man then flies out west to revisit Thanos' Earth base from Iron Man issue number 55 to see if he can find anything to help. Instead of sticking with Captain Marvel, I'm gonna follow Iron Man as he continues his flight out west in Marvel Features, Volume 1, issue number 12, published in 1973 and written by Mike Friedrich. This is the final issue of this run of Marvel Features. Unbeknownst to Iron Man, he isn't the only superhero in the vicinity of Thanos' Earth base. Benjamin Grimm is aggravated to see that his old buddy Iron Man doesn't stop to help give him a lift as he works his way across the desert. Back at Thanos' base, the Blood Brothers have been left behind to keep an eye on it. The two check in with their boss before they attack Iron Man. As they strike, Iron Man knows the two of them together are too much for him to handle. After a brief scuffle, he escapes Thanos' former lair, but runs into the Thing while attempting to fly out the front door. Benjamin Grimm is still angry at Iron Man for flying over his head earlier while Ben was lost in the desert. The Thing followed Iron Man to this location where he was planning on expressing his displeasure with being passed over. Iron Man is out cold after the collision, but the Thing is still conscious. As he starts to stand up, one of the Blood Brothers proceeds to clock him, knocking the Thing out. Thanos commends his lackeys, who are amazed that Thanos can see and speak to them from wherever. Held captive and watching and listening from behind Thanos are his brother Eros and his father Mentor. Thanos insists that all who oppose him must die. First among those should be the superheroes of Earth. He gives the Blood Brothers permission to kill their prey. The Thing has regained consciousness but is still too weak to do anything. As the Blood Brothers prepare to attack, one says a phrase which stands out to Benjamin Grimm. He says, "We thirst." A phrase said by galactic vampires. The fangs come out as one of them literally tries to suck blood from a stone. This gives Benjamin Grimm all the motivation he needs to get back into the fight. It looks like the Thing is going to be defeated, but Iron Man wakes up and gets back into the fray. A massive brawl breaks out, going first one way and then the other. The battle rages to an extent that the four of them bring a spire-shaped mountain tumbling down on top of them, and still the battle rages on. Once the Thing and Iron Man decide to team up and work together, they make short work of the Blood Brothers. Thanos is disappointed in their defeat and says that this failure demolishes a major beachhead on Earth. Thanos will not reward failure and states that for failure, there can only be one fate. As he says this, he uses the cosmic cube to make the Blood Brothers disappear. Iron Man and the Thing are both left wondering the same thing as the reader. Did Thanos kill them or transport them to a fate worse than death? Benjamin Grimm is hoping that Iron Man will give him a lift out of the desert now that the battle is over, but Iron Man insists that his power levels are too low to carry one as heavy as the Thing away right now. Iron Man, having found nothing of interest, leaves, and the two heroes part ways. Back to Captain Marvel Volume 1, issue number 30, right where we left off. Iron Man had just flown away, and Rick and Marvel are on their way to save Luann, or so one would think. Instead, we find Marvel walking to his bedroom. Rick is getting pissed off, thinking that Marvel is dragging his feet. Marvel gives a pretty good response that puts Rick in his place. Marvel tells Rick that he's assuring Luann's rescue by waiting for daylight so that he doesn't have to fight the controller while he's in his weakest state. Jarvis arrives and informs Captain Marvel that a gentleman has arrived to speak with Master Rick on matters of business. Marvel, a bit of a stand-up guy, switches places with Rick. Before we get to see who the late-night guest is, we are switched back over to the controller, who has organized hundreds of people, Rick's girl Luann is among them, into a group that are chanting, "Hail Thanos! Hail the controller!" All eyes rest on the controller. He explains to his slaves that thanks to Thanos improving his slave disc, he now has complete control over those who wear the slave disc. The controller is interrupted by a shout of, "You fool!" Thanos has been looking in on him and orders that this crowd be dispersed immediately. He's furious. These Control slave agents are supposed to maintain their cover until Thanos attacks Earth. He's worried that the Controller's ego-boosting stunt might have ruined their cover. The Controller is shocked to get called out. Thanos lets him know that the only reason he's still alive is that Thanos still has a use for him. Thanos knows that Marvel is on his way to the Controller. The Controller is tasked with killing Captain Marvel or having Thanos kill the Controller with the Cosmic Cube. All of this begs the question, if Thanos can just outright kill the Controller or Blood Brothers with the Cosmic Cube, then what stops him from killing Captain Marvel the same way? All the same, the Controller understands that he mustn't fail. Back at Avengers Mansion, Rick walks in on a heavier set Mordecai P. Boggs, who blames the weight gain on his prosperity. Rick thinks that Mordecai is there to collect because Rick had to walk out on his previous contract, but much to his surprise, Mordecai is there to re-sign Rick. He's seen the news reports about Rick fighting alongside the Avengers and thinks that it's great press. In fact, he wants to make Rick a teen idol. For some reason, Rick can't look Mordecai in the eye, possibly because he hasn't consulted with Marvel as he agrees to sign back up with Mr. Boggs, going as far as saying to give him the weekend to tie a few things up and he'll report in for work on Monday morning. Mordecai tells Rick to meet him at 6 at the same cafe in Greenwich Village which the two of them first met. Rick takes a moment to ponderously peer out the window and talk to himself. He genuinely hopes that he can make Monday's meeting, but he knows that if he doesn't, it'll probably be because him and Marvel got killed while saving his girl. The next morning, right at dawn, Marvel bursts out like an early bird and sucks in as much sunlight as possible as he proclaims that day is the day that Luann shall be freed. Rick seems startled as he informs Marvel that he's developed a sparkling trail behind him as he flies. Marvel doesn't seem to mind and brushes it off as a side effect of the physical changes Eon put him through. He calls it photonic energy exhaust and claims that it has no effect on him or the atmosphere. Iron Man's tracing device has picked up the Controller. His location is narrowed down to a single 4-story building. I kinda like this panel. Marvel stops and takes a moment to point out that just yesterday, the Controller handed him a crushing defeat, and he has enough respect for Rick to stop and say that he doesn't want to put their lives on the line unless both of them decide that this move is necessary. And Rick tells Marvel to get on it, and as a team, they go in. Marvel crashes through a window directly into the same room as the Controller. The Controller has 3 guys ready to surround Marvel. Marvel wants to talk, but the Controller doesn't want to hear it. For some reason, the Controller seems to think his 3 guys are going to be enough to handle Marvel as he turns away. The battle is short and ends with Marvel calling out the Controller, only instead of calling him the Controller, he calls him Mr. Sandhurst. Every time I think this, I think, oh yeah, cosmic awareness. But no, he read Iron Man's files on him. Marvel says that he knows about the tragic accident that ravaged the Controller. This would be when the Controller's brother Vincent accidentally pushed Basil into a vat of chemicals. Marvel wants to tell the Controller how wrong he's done by himself, and rightfully so, the Controller thinks he's done all right by himself. He has all the wealth that he needs, and soon he'll have all the power he desires. Marvel starts getting a little hippy-dippy here, telling the Controller that he's wrong, that the Controller squanders his energies with fleeting dreams of grandeur, which will never give him what he really wants, inner peace and truth. The Controller tells Marvel that with enough power, he can make his own peace and truth. Marvel takes a pleading stance, appealing to the Controller's logical, human side. Marvel points out that the only reward for those who serve under Thanos is death. He uses Scrag and Super Skrull as examples. The Controller can't help but call Marvel a fool, claiming that thanks to Thanos he has more power than ever. Marvel calmly points out what the Controller already knows. The only reason Thanos lets the controller survive is that he has a use for him. What will happen when the controller has outlived that usefulness? Marvel must have hit a nerve because the controller's more logical side is overtaken by emotion as the controller tells Marvel that he'll hear no more. The controller accuses Marvel of attempting to confuse him. And what it seems to come down to is that the controller doesn't want to return to prison. And if Thanos hadn't busted him out, that's where the controller would still be. So for the time being, the controller still takes his orders from Master Thanos. The controller attacks. Marvel deftly dodges the blow, grabs the controller's leg, and uses his own weight to send him careening into a wall of the lab. This is the first time that we've seen Marvel full-on cut loose since his meeting with Eon. Rick Jones is blown away by how fast Marvel can suddenly move. The controller has been tossed out of the building, but he's far from done. Meanwhile, Marvel is searching the laboratory as fast as possible in an attempt to locate Luann. Marvel finds her pretty easily, but in that moment, the controller returns. He grabs a hold of Marvel and tells him that angering him is angering the power of over 1,000 people. Marvel is caught in his arms like he's bound in a vice. Most of what the controller tells us over the next several panels are things that we already know, but it's nice to have the controller's full role in this scheme laid out in one place, so I'm going to use it for a recap. Thanos broke the controller out of the prison, then he upgraded the controller's slave disk to make people do anything he commands. The controller claims he now has everything he ever wanted, strength and power. Wait, I thought he wanted wealth and power. Anyways, this is why he serves Thanos. We learn that the big plan is when Thanos arrives with his fleet of space marauders, the controller will activate his carefully selected agents to ensure that all of Earth's defenses are sabotaged. Between Thanos' fleet and the Cosmic Cube, I'm having a hard time coming up with reasons why the controller needs to be here at all, but whatever. Comics, right? Maybe it's because, as the controller points out next, the Earth is relatively insignificant within Thanos' larger plan of galaxy-wide domination. Thanos has promised that once his conquest of Earth is completed, then he will assign the controller rulership of the Earth. I think this is the real reason why Thanos wants the controller in the position of viceroy over the Earth. The controller is a very heavy hand that might be capable of keeping a planet full of supers in check. But as the controller soapboxes, he trails off. For the first time today, he gazes into Marvel's eyes and he sees that he's not fighting the man that he fought yesterday. And you'll have to forgive me, but sometimes, for some moments, we need to read the words of the original comic in full. No, this is definitely not the man the controller humbled at Avengers Mansion. This is not the coward Sandhurst thought he had been facing. This is a man to be reckoned with. This man has conquered. He beat vanity and pride by seeing the universe as it is. He knows what must be done, and he does it, but does it with great sorrow. For this man knows truth and peace. He now wishes to share all this knowledge, but knowledge must be protected, and this man can protect it, for he is cosmically aware. He knows strength. He knows weakness. Knowing this, he knows when to strike, and our non-warrior protector goes on the attack once more. As the controller gets tossed outside his own lab for the second time today, this time he manages to turn on his boot jets before falling to the ground. Marvel knows that he can't let the controller back inside of the building. Luann could get hurt as a result of their battle. There are other people and other buildings. Why is Marvel only concerned about this one building and Luann? The controller doesn't understand why Marvel didn't just escape with the girl, but Marvel tells him it's because he needs to set free all of those who are under the controller's spell. The controller lands a hard blow on Marvel, hard enough that Marvel says it nearly took his head off of his neck and that another one of that force would kill him. The controller then tells Marvel why he can't let this go. Either the controller kills Marvel or Thanos kills the controller. And this is what I was talking about a moment ago. Here we see the controller take down what appears to be at least a 3-story building. How many people might have been in that thing? As the controller comes crashing down on top of Marvel, Marvel reflects that the controller is every bit as much a slave to Thanos as Luan is to him, but this is not the time for pity. Marvel needs to stand his ground. And defend himself he does. With a kick to the jaw, he moves like a rocket, catching his foe before he reaches the ground with enough force to wreck a Mack truck. But as one might imagine, that isn't enough force to stop the controller. As Marvel flies backward, he begins to comprehend how powerful the controller actually is. And as his mind reels for answers on how to overcome such brute force, he finds nothing. The controller comes at Marvel, using his fists to toss Marvel through the air like a limp rag doll. He feels his victory is certain. In response to this, we're told about a new Captain Marvel power. Inner strength. Inner strength only works after outer power has failed, and must be held in check until the perfect moment to strike. As Marvel proceeds to land blows, I do take issue with part of the narration. We're told that fighting has always been serious business for him. This, again, just seems to go against the grain that he's a reborn man, no longer the warrior, now the protector. Writer Jim Starlin seems to be aware of this disconnect and attempts to address it. We're told that it's true that Marvel has forsaken the way of the warrior, but his Kree past still runs deep within his blood, and that in order to seek peace, he still must know the way of war in order to protect himself and those he loves. Wow, what way to do an about face on everything that took place last issue, but not really. I can't help but be reminded of when Jim Starlin also wrote about the history of the Eternals, with Uranus representing a warlike mentality and Kronos representing a peaceful mentality, and the only way Kronos could achieve peace was through war. We're literally back at the idea of Kronos fighting for peace, or Marvel having to fight off his worst self. I feel that it's important to point this out, as now this is 3 times within the same story arc that Starlin has fallen back on this being the basis of conflict, and it probably says more about his viewpoints than anything else. We even see this earlier in this issue. Even when one attempts to go about a peaceful solution, as Marvel did when he first approached the controller, the end result is oftentimes a physical confrontation. I personally take issue with this outlook, as I thought the entire point of Marvel's rebirth ceremony and everything else that went down with Eon was to kill that portion of Marvel, to kill the Kree warrior. And in this, his first conflict since then, we're told that that was a fun concept, but due to his Kree blood, it's mostly meaningless words. So we don't get a new Marvel. We get the same old Marvel with yet another power upgrade. As the controller and Marvel face off, Thanos interrupts. Thanos won't let the controller finish the battle. Perhaps he foresaw the battle's end with the cosmic cube. Whatever the reason, he's decided that the controller has failed him, and it's time to cut the battle short. As the controller is whisked away, he claims that Marvel was right. Thanos is a faithless leader, and he was a fool to serve him. Thanos is impressed that Marvel defeated the controller, but notes the change that has come over Marvel. We're told the reason Thanos doesn't just outright destroy Marvel is he wants to know more about this metamorphosis. After the battle, Marvel takes a moment to reflect before clinging his wrists together and swapping places with Rick Jones. Those who were under the spell of the controller are now free. Rick takes off through the crowd to find Luan. We're told that though many seek to chain us, if a person retains hope and spirit, he shall always be free. Great words, but it's ironic that they use those same words in the same panel that they show one of the controller's slave discs, the device that doesn't care how much hope or spirit its slaves possess. 12 hours later, there is a knock on the door of Avengers headquarters. Jarvis opens the door to find Drax the Destroyer standing outside. He's here to see Iron Man or Captain Marvel on a matter of galactic urgency. This issue then follows up with a 1-page prologue. Thanos is on Titan, cradling the cosmic cube. He's prepared to strike, having given his enemies enough time to lament the fates that gave him this power. As Thanos prepares to strike, he points out a curious fact in a moment of self-reflection. All those that came before him who used the cube to further their own ambitions have all met in failure. Does the same fate await Thanos? His answer is no. Thanos knows the cube's true worth. It should never be used to gain material power or wealth. Thanos views the intended use of the cube as both sacred and abstract. All Thanos wants from the cube is fulfillment of one wish. But we're made to wait until next month before that wish is revealed. And it will also have to wait until my next video. Moondragon's earliest story arc begins in the pages of Iron Man and carries over into the pages of Daredevil before intersecting with the Thanos War. I promise to finish out both story arcs in the next episode of Cosmic Comics. Thanks for watching. Feel free to hit any of the buttons below. I'm out.